One of the parts of building a guitar that seems to perplex quite a few people is how a neck is put together. So this is going to be my method of building a guitar neck today. As you can see, I've got my neck blank here. It's a bird's eye maple neck blank. This is going to be a bolt-on Strat style neck. And I've drawn out the shape of my neck here to all the dimensions. I've got the truss rod markings in, everything's accurate. And the point is measure, 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 measure again before you start cutting, because as soon as you start cutting there is no going back. Once you're convinced you've measured correctly and everything is accurate, taking the neck blank to the bandsaw is the next step. And I'm starting with the headstock here, speeding up some of the footage so that you don't have to watch it all. I'm starting with the headstock here because that gets all the tight curves out of the way at the start. It also takes a bit of weight off the blank at this end, making it a little bit more manoeuvrable when I'm doing the rest of the neck. Here I'm doing some relief cuts into the excess material. This means that I can take out those little sections, those curved sections at the bottom of the headstock without having to travel down the rest of the neck blank in one pass, because I don't like doing too much in the one go. And if I'm cutting straight, I want to cut straight, and if I'm cutting curves, I want to cut just curves. So these two lines that meet up at the edges of the neck will allow me to take out those little curved sections nice and easily on their own. The key to getting these tight turns is to rotate the wood into the straight blade. Don't try to guide the blade along the curve, because that will move the blade off centre and never get you good results. So the idea is to try and keep the blade running straight and just rotate the wood very slowly into it. Let the blade do the cutting and don't try to force or move anything too quickly. And you can see here, get nice tight turns outside of my lines I've drawn, and I'll tidy up that later. Now we move on to cutting the straight edges of the neck, and I'm starting at the heel and working my way up. So it's a case of just keeping my eye on the blade and making sure it's following that pencil line I've drawn. Again, rotating the wood to keep it in line with the straight bandsaw blade. And as we come to the edge there, we'll see just pushing it in nice and gently, and off comes the excess. And now we go down the other side of the neck, and once this is completed we'll have our rough neck shape done. It will be a bit outside of the lines, but that's what we want. Once we've got the bulk of the material off, then we can manoeuvre the workpiece a little bit better, and we can get closer to the line and refine our shape. Again, this is a process of not pushing the wood into the blade, not trying to change the directions too fast, just letting the blade do the cutting and just pushing the wood very gently into the blade and letting the blade do the work. And as we can see here, this is the rough neck shape ready for some refinement. And I'll go in with the bandsaw and take the cuts closer to the lines that I've drawn for the refining, including going to the little tight curves at the top of the headstock, which I've left to last, just because I think that'll be a nice way to finish things off. And here we are with the refined shape, a lot closer to the lines, the initial lines that I'd drawn, and will take very little work to get the machine teeth marks out. So now we'll move on to things like truss rod and other parts of this neck construction. This is the neck, supported in a workbench with two clamps on either side of it. I've shown this before on the channel. This is my basic truss rod routing jig. Essentially my router will come in from here and it will run along the middle like so. So it can't move anywhere other than that centre channel where I want to put the truss rod. This is the truss rod here. It's a two-way truss rod, so turning it one direction will bend it one way and turning it the other will bend it the other way. Some truss rods are only single action, this is a double action, so this will give me more control over the neck in the long run. There is a particular complication with this truss rod. At this end we can take the size of it, overall size, to be just under 9mm, but up at this end, especially right here, we can see that that tapers up to a comparatively massive 13mm. What this means, of course, is I'm going to have to cut this channel at an angle to accommodate the tapering of the truss rod. That's not a particular problem, however, because as long as I keep this end of the neck raised 3mm compared to this end, it means that my channel from here to here, when I run my router across, will be deeper here than it is here. And that's exactly what I want, and I'll get a smooth taper from one end to the other. It's also a wise idea to only cut shallow sections at a time and check progress throughout to make sure you're not making any mistakes. So with that in mind, we're going to take a couple of millimetres out of this slot and just make sure we're in the right place. As we can see from that first shallow cut, the gradient is working. It's deeper here and then it tapers out and eventually the router stops touching around about here. So when we get to the 13mm depth down here, we should hopefully be much less at that end. With the final shape of the channel complete, we can test fit the truss rod and it should fit in nice and snug and flush to the surface, and that's exactly what we see here. Got a nice tight fit, a nice flush to the surface, so that's going to make a good contact and not move around inside the neck. What I'm doing now is drilling some pilot holes for the tuning machines on this headstock. This design is a compact headstock and hopefully give a sort of straight string pull effect. I've not really tested it, but we'll see how well it goes. I want to reduce the level of this headstock on the bandsaw, and I don't want to lose the position markers that I've drawn for the tuning machine, so we'll drill the pilot holes now. And this is the headstock fresh from the bandsaw. Apologies for not filming that, but it would just be more of the same, the bandsaw action you saw earlier in this video. Now I'm coming in with files and rasps and I'm tidying up some of the contours on this face, making sure it's all smooth and flush, especially on that little ramp that goes between the fretboard and the new level of the headstock. So that's a rough rasp I've got in there to take off the heavy material and bring that down at the same level as the rest of the headstock. Certainly want to be very careful with rough rasps because they can take out a lot of material very quickly, and that could very easily ruin all the work you've done up until this point. So I'm taking a lot of great care when I'm trying to bring this section, this curved ramped section, down to the same level as I've cut the headstock. Now this is a Japanese saw rasp and this thing is savage. You'll be seeing a lot more of this being used on the rest of the neck build process, but this is just trying to smooth out the lines and the curves and get everything flat, and it's doing a fantastic job of it. I highly recommend this tool if you're going to be doing any sort of woodwork, especially guitar building and neck building. This is gonna save so much time and so much effort. And as I come in here with the finer file to try and take out some of the teeth marks of the heavier rasps, I think I'll wrap up this part 1 of the neck building video. I think we've seen enough for today, and the next part we'll see a bit more of gluing on fretboards and tidying up shapes of the neck. But for now, keep it loud and I'll see you later.